What's going on, geezers? Specimen here, and today I'm doing a Marvel Snap tier list of the starter and pool 1 cards. Gonna be putting them from the best to the worst, and yeah, let's do this and crack on. If you want to see more tier lists from me, make sure you subscribe for other Marvel Snap content. Obviously, when a new patch comes out, I'm gonna be doing another tier list, and also make sure you check me out on Twitch, where I do stream every day. Cool, let's crack on. Misty Knight dead. When Washington DC is the hot location, she's actually good. I was actually playing her. She's probably the best of these like common cards that you've got. Shocker as well. Like all these are going to go into the bottom category. But when Washington DC was hot, Misty Knight was actually in my decks, and Washington DC being the location that cards without abilities get points. Colossus up next. Colossus is actually okay. I'm not a big fan of the card personally. I do see it being played quite a bit. I'm going to put Colossus in half decent. Has some uses where you can play it into Hala. You can also play it into like the row that you're using your Deathlock on or something like that. It's half decent. I don't think it really deserves anything better than that. I don't think I've ever really played this card past the first couple of days. Blade up next. Now, Blade is a discard card, which again, I've said these discard cards are kind of bad. But honestly, Blade, I'm going to put in very decent because it's really good in strong guy decks. Right now, strong guy decks are being really overshadowed because the best card in the game, Moon Girl, one of the best cards in the game, is increasing your hand size, so you don't get to play Stronger as much, because Stronger you need to have an empty hand by the end of the game for you to get your value off of it. But Blade is just amazing in Stronger decks because it's 3 stats, and if you're in a position where you've got too many cards in hand, you can't play them all, you play your Blade on turn 6 to discard that one last card, and therefore you get your Stronger 6 stats as well. I think Blade's really, really good in those decks in particular. We've got Wolfsbane up next. Also, I'm going to put Wolfsbane into very decent. This is one of the cards that you get at the start of the game, which you're going to be playing a lot of, but when you get into pool 2 and pool 3, you're going to start playing it less. Really good in the reveal decks, though. You could honestly make a case for it going into popping off. I think it's going to be either at the bottom of popping off or right at the top of very decent. We might rejiggle a few bits around as we go. Spectre up next. I'm going to put her into half decent, which, again, I think honestly, you could argue putting Spectrum in dead. I think she's pretty understated. I'm honestly tempted. I think Spectrum is the worst 6 drop maybe in the whole game. Certainly out of the starter ones, she is pretty bad. So I'm actually going to put Spectrum in dead. I don't think you should play this card outside of your quests where you have to play, like, do a quest to actually win games with Spectrum or something early. So yeah. Swordmaster up next. Again, the discard card's pretty difficult to evaluate, because early game, you just don't have a functional discard deck that is worth playing, in my opinion. Swordmaster, 7 stats for 4. A little bit below the curve, but obviously you have that discard. I'm going to put him in half decent. Honestly, maybe he should be in decent. But based on the fact you just don't have discard decks, and Blade, as I say, is way more likely to be played in stronger decks, I think. I'm going to put Swordmaster in half decent. But I'm sure this card is actually pretty good, especially when you get discard synergies in pool 3. But I don't really think it's fair to say that, because most people watching this video going to be interested in pool 1, pool 2 mainly, and yeah, pool 3 is a slog. Captain America up next. It's a 3/3. It's going to boost itself by 4, or boost your other cards in this location by 1, right? Including itself, I think. So it's 6 stats, right? So it doesn't include self. 6 for 3 is kind of good. It's nice with Onslaught. Honestly, Captain America, for how famous this character is, a little bit disappointed in this card. I'm going to put it in decent. I hardly ever use this guy. Cosmo up next. Cosmo is a 3/3. This is actually a variant art I've got here. So is the Captain America one. It's a control type card. It obviously counters things like Nova. I'm going to put Cosmo in very decent. I'm not going to put it in popping off because a lot of the time you're trading down. Honestly, Cosmo could go into popping off though. Like, a lot of people are big fans of Cosmo. It's the kind of card that I think the better you get at the game, the better the card becomes. If you're just starting, it's quite a high skill ceiling card, and it's really there to counter cards. Like, if there's a certain card in the meta that's got an on reveal ability, Cosmo is going to cancel that card out, and you can be a great control tool. I'm going to put it in very decent. I don't think it's quite above. White Tiger up next. One of the best cards you get from the starter tree. I'm going to put it in popping off. I think the card is really good. Mainly, of course, you're going to be wanting using it in an on-reveal deck with cards like Odin. If you're just using it as a value card, it's not so impressive. But if you're pairing it with Odin, maybe pairing it with a card like Storm, which is a pool 2 card, it can be a really great card. Up next, Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch, I'm also going to put into popping off. I think it's a very, very strong card. It's a 1/2, and of course resets or changes the location. So very powerful card to just include as a 1-drop. Particularly if there is a hot location or something like that, which you don't really want to play. You know, you can always just tech a Scarlet Witch and then bang, your opponent might have like a deck very much teched for a certain certain location and bang your Scarlet Witch comes through. Squirrel Girl up next. I'm also going to put Squirrel Girl right at the top of popping off. I'm definitely not going to put Squirrel Girl into Broken. She's a great card, especially with Nova at the moment. Nova, of course, giving lots of buffs. But she does have a big downside, which is the fact that you could play her early and then play into Space Throne. Also, the fact that you're going to have one strength cards into every row does mean that you're going to be a little bit weak on all 3 rows, unless you're consuming some of those with cards like Carnage. Definitely does have downsides, but it's a really, really powerful card, of course. Korg up next. I think Korg is really underrated. I actually just watched Thor Ragnarok, where this guy's in. This guy's a legend, mate. So I'm putting Korg into very decent. It's not a card you see that much, honestly. But the card's really powerful. I think it's one of the better 1-drops that doesn't see much play at the moment. And I think as some of the other cards get balanced, this is a card that's very much likely to see play. Giving your opponent a rock, very, very powerful if they do draw it, of course. Cyclops up next. Of course, it's going to be in dead, so it's Abomination. We could put those guys in. Strong Guy up next. Honestly, Strong Guy is kind of OP. Like, the card is insane, but I'm going to put it in popping off because it's very much overshadowed at the moment by the Moon Girl decks, which they don't have big synergy. Strong Guy was very much the meta for the first few days of the game. This actually, Strong Guy was the deck that I got to Infinite rank, and I was just completely tearing it up, hardly losing. But yeah, because of Devil Dinosaur as well being one of the better cards, Strong Guy is not seeing much play at the moment, but the card is very, very powerful. Enchantress up next. Enchantress is going into popping off. I don't think I can put Enchantress into Broken, mate. She is removing the ongoing abilities from cards in the row you play her in. That includes Stronger, that includes Devil Dinosaur, that includes many very powerful cards. However, there is a card called Rogue, which is basically a Enchantress on steroids because it steals one of the ongoing abilities from your opponent in that location. So if they've got an Iron Man, you steal that. And she's only a 3-drop. She's a pull 3 card, so you're not going to have her for a very long time. But I think as soon as you hit Rogue, Enchantress is very much not going to be played very much. And Rogue would absolutely be in this top category. We've got Deathlock. I think you've just got to put Deathlock into popping off because of the synergy it has with Nova. It's in a lot of the competitive decks. In pull 3, there's Venom, and this kind of maybe gets a little bit overshadowed, but yeah, I think Carnage is definitely the better card than Deathlock, but because of how good Nova is, it's going to be in there. The thing, obviously, at the bottom, Carnage as well, I'm going to put into popping off. I'm not going to put it into Broken. Like, it very much is Nova that is carrying this card, but Carnage is good. Frees up some space, has some nice synergy with cards like Squirrel Girl. If you see the Ninja location where you get like a -2 in the locations where each card is worth negative points, Carnage really shines in those kinds of situations. Not finally, up next we've got Devil Dinosaur. It's OP. It just is. It's an insanely good card. 14 stats this card can play for if you have 7 cards in your hand, which is the max hand size. Of course, then you can pair it with things like Iron Man for just insane points, things like Onslaught even. But more commonly, you just get a few different dinosaurs. You play Moon Girl, get a second dinosaur, play 2 of them, and you just play it for 14 stats on the last turn. Obviously, Sentinels and ways you can draw cards and things like that. The card's just insane. Atua, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. I think this card's terrible. There's like some metas that you might want to play this card in, so maybe we could put it like here. I think the card's really bad. It shows you the 2 locations, right, that aren't revealed, but it's not really doing much for you because you have to actually draw the card for it to work. I think this card would be decent if it just worked even if it was in your deck, but it has to actually be in your hand to show the locations. Maybe some metas where there's like a hot location. I don't think so. Star-Lord up next. This card is, I think it's decent. It buffs by 4, I believe, so it's 6 stats. Might be 5 stats. Either way, it's decent. I'm not a big fan of these cards, the Guardians of the Galaxy, but I do think the cheaper ones are the better. Rocket Raccoon being the best, Star-Lord being the second best, and then they get progressively worse, with Gamora, in my opinion, probably being the worst of the lot. White Queen up next. I don't think I like this card very much at all. I'm going to put White Queen into the dead category. Lots of people play American Chavez, and White Queen is going to draw you a gold card that's in your opponent's hand, a 6-cost card in your opponent's hand. Very often it's just going to whiff, and why not just play a 6-cost card yourself? And if you're looking for draw synergy, there's better ways of doing it. For sure. I don't think the card is very good at all. Maybe you could put it into half decent, but honestly, I'm putting it in the dead category. Blue Marvel up next. I'm going to put it in half decent. I imagine this card's going to get buffed at some point. Obviously, very much overshadowed by Nova. Just don't really think it's doing enough. It needs a bit of a bigger body, I think. I think the ability to buff everything by 1 is fine, but it needs to have a bit more oomph in the row you actually play it, and maybe like a 6 body could help this out a bit. Wolverine, I think Wolverine's going to be really good in discard decks, but like realistically, you're not going to have any decent discard decks. I think we could probably put it in decent. I think it's a bit harsh to put it in half decent. Like maybe we could put this up here as well, the Swordmaster. If you're looking to play a discard deck, you're going to play the cards. Doctor Strange, card I've played with so damn much because I played a lot of movement decks. Honestly, not a massive fan. I actually kicked Doctor Strange from quite a lot of my movement decks. I'm going to put him very decent. The mana situation with the card is just really awkward. Like 3 cost just makes things awkward. You're going to be relying on drawing multiple mana if you're still in pull 1. If you get to pull 2, there's also Vulture. You can do some really nice things with Doctor Strange and multiple man. But honestly, I found it to be pretty lackluster overall. Domino up next. Domino, I would have said, is the worst card in the game until Jubilee decks start being a thing. So Jubilee is a pull 2 card, which Domino has some decent synergy with. I'm not going to put her in dead then. I'm going to put her right at the bottom of half decent. But honestly, guys, if you're not playing Jubilee, worst card in the game because it's guaranteed to be in your hand every game. Quicksilver is a similar card, which I'll do, but I actually think Quicksilver's decent. Quicksilver was actually the first card that I ever got foiled, which is basically you get the infinite split on it. I thought this card was like the best card of the game when I first started playing, which it's not. It's far from it. Quicksilver, I just think is a lot better because that 1-drop card is you know, it's more likely that you don't have a card to play. Domino, though, it's just nah. It's just 1 stat more than Quicksilver for double the cost, and I just think it's pants. Don't play this card unless you're playing Jubilee. Spider-Woman up next. She's 8 stats potentially, but probably not going to be. I think Spider-Woman's actually pretty bad. I think I'm going to put her into half decent. Because your opponent, you have to play this after your opponent's got a full row to get that 8 stats. There's also some Odin synergy potentially as well. But again, you're relying on your opponent actually having 4 cards in that row for Spider-Woman to get her value. Even like if you don't have initiative, for example, she's only going to play for like 7 stats. If your opponent plays a card, you play a card in that row, your Spider-Woman flips first, and then theirs flips, and you don't even lower it by 1 point. So I think Spider-Woman's pretty bad. Yondu up next. Yondu's decent. There's some metas where like Kamar Taj was hot, where these mill cards are really good. I do think Korg is a better version of Yondu. Yondu is milling a card from your opponent's deck. Korg is adding a rock. I do think adding a rock is going to be more powerful 9 times out of 10. Of course, if you Yondu into one of your opponent's best cards, their win condition, really good. It can also hit Chavez quite a lot. Honestly, Yondu deserves, I think, to be in very decent. But at the lower end of it, yeah. Electra. We're going to put Electra into Broken Mate. One of the best 1-drops in the game. She's obviously trading up to pretty much every single one in the game, apart from a card like Korg, which has like some kind of upside, which isn't just points. Really good against cards like Ant-Man and other things as well. Electra's just very good. Interestingly, now people have hit pull 3, she is seeing less play. But yeah, Electra's just great. We have Forge next. Forge, I'm going to put into decent because of its synergy it has with Multiple Man. You buff up Multiple Man and then you get lots of copies of Multiple Man. It is only 3 stats though, so it is pretty lackluster if you're just playing it as a value card. I wouldn't recommend just for the synergy with Multiple Man. Put it here. Gamora. I'm not going to put her in dead because honestly the stats of the card are fine. Like, she can be 10 stats, but I don't know, man. I'm not a big fan of these cards at all. As I say, I think the lower ones are better, and cards like Gamora are worse. So, yeah, I just don't ever think I'm going to play this card. I would actually love to see the Guardians of the Galaxy get reworks and maybe some of them keep it. Just out of interest, I'm going to put Rocket Raccoon into very decent. Like, again, when you get into pool 2, 3, this is not a card you're going to play, but this is a card, when I was in pool 1, I had it in almost all my decks, so... yeah, I think the card's really good, actually. I'm going to put slightly below Korg, slightly ahead of Blade, I think. Maybe Blade's slightly better just because of the strong guy stuff. American Chavez next. Broken card, insanely good. This is one of the... this is like one of the cards which is... It almost makes sense in every deck to play it because you're turning your card from a 12-card deck to an 11-card deck. In some ways, so if you've got a combo deck, for example, you want to play movement, where it's really important you draw your multiple man early. You're playing American Chavez in your deck means that it is more likely that you draw your multiple man before turn 6, and you don't exactly want multiple man on turn 6 anyway, so who cares? It also just gives you a way of having a guaranteed 6-drop on turn 6. So, for example, in movement, you might be playing Heimdall as well, But Heimdall in some situations can lose you the game. You don't want to move stuff, and then you've just got your Chavez that you can play. So you've got options. Card's insane. I think it needs to have like a 6 body with its ability, and it would honestly still see play in some combo heavy decks where you just want that little bit of thinning in those early rounds, because there's not much consistency in this game, but this is a consistency card in a lot of ways, while also actually being pretty bloody powerful. Sentinel up next. I don't know if Sentinel quite deserves to be in Broken. It probably does, but that's mainly because of the other cards that you can pair this with, such as Devil Dinosaur, such as the Collector, which is a pool 2 card. They're really what makes Sentinel powerful. I'm going to put Sentinel in Popping Off because I think this card is perfectly balanced. I don't think it needs to get nerfed. Whereas I would say Dino, definitely. Chavez, I would definitely say needs to get nerfed. The other ones which are going in Broken, even Electra. I mean, Electra you could honestly put here, but I'm going to put it right up here. I'm not sure Electra needs a nerf that badly, but yeah, because there's downsides to her. Anyway, Groot up next. Again, Guardians of the Galaxy, pretty boring. I'm going to put Groot into half decent, I think. I think Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon are kind of the standouts, and they do get worse as you go along. You could honestly probably put it in here. It probably is deserving to be in this category of decent cards. If you get it early, it's decent. Yeah, it's decent. Gamora, we'll put in... I'm putting Gamora in here. Bishop up next. Really good card. Great card. We'll put it in Popping Off, probably about here. Yeah, when you're playing strong guy decks with lots of 1-drops, and you've got cards like Blade and all these other 1-drops, Bishop's amazing. Again, it has gone out of fashion because people favouring the Devil Dinosaur decks with Moon Girl and things like that. But the card is really, really good. Definitely expect it to see a lot more play once Moon Girl, Dinosaur, and things like that are nerfed. With Strong Guy, great little combo because you want to play lots of 1-drops in Strong Guy decks. Yeah, really good card. Hulkbuster up next. Hulkbuster is a really cool card with multiple man. We'll definitely put it into the decent category. Honestly, we'll put it in very decent just because of the multiple man synergy. If you want to play a movement deck, Hulkbuster and Doctor Strange are going to be in it early game. Cable up next. Cable goes into the Popping Off category. One of the best cards really going because it is drawing a card from your opponent's deck. Now, if your opponent is a good player and has a nice deck, then Cable is probably going to draw you a good card. Unless, of course, there's been rocks put into their deck or something like that. You're drawing the bottom card from their deck and putting it into your hand. When their meta is like it currently is as well, and lots of people are playing similar decks with Devil Dinosaur, Sentinel Moon Girls, Novas, it means Cable's got really good odds of actually drawing you a very playable card indeed. It has synergy with Dinosaur, has synergy with the Collector, which again is a pool 2 card, but really, really good card. Highly recommend you play it. Hawkeye up next. Hawkeye, I'm going to put it into decent category, I think, because it's... Now, I'll put it in half decent. It's 3 stats for 1, which is really good, but you give up so much information to your opponent. Nah, honestly, Hawkeye is probably decent, but it is a 1-drop that I never play anymore, and it was one of the first 1-drops from the starter deck that I removed. But it is a starter deck card similar to Quicksilver. I think like these cards are both pretty decent. I actually quite like both of them, but they, yeah, the big downside of Hawkeye is the fact that it is letting your opponent pretty much know where you're playing next, which then gives them value on things like Rocket Raccoon and Star-Lord. And the big downside of Quicksilver, of course, is that you're drawing it every game, which means you're less likely to see every other card in your deck because you're playing this. Heimdall up next. Mate, I love Heimdall. I'm a massive, massive fan of this card. I'm going to put Heimdall into the Popping Off category, which is maybe a little controversial. I don't think so, though. The biggest downside of Heimdall is if your opponent knows that you're playing Heimdall, and they just play around it. But that's exactly why you play, one of the reasons you play America Chavez in your deck, because sometimes you don't even need to play the Heimdall. You can just play the America Chavez and you're going to win anyway, and there's no harm in that. So I love this card. Moving everything, lots of bamboozle potential, and obviously then when you add in synergies, cards like Multiple Man and Vulture, card's insanely good. So I've got it foiled and quite close to my second Infinity Split on Heimdall. We have Hulk next. Hulk, very underrated. Of course, if you compare it to American Chavez, it's only 1 point more and has many more downsides. It can be in your hand early. American Chavez can't. But it's an extra point. Hulk's honestly decent. Like, Hulk is one of the better starter cards. Put it into half decent. As soon as you get America Chavez, there's no reason for you to ever play Hulk, pretty much, apart from in like some Jubilee decks. Mate, do you know what? I think Hulk deserves to be in decent. I think Hulk is actually a really solid card. It's so overshadowed by America Chavez that no one plays Hulk. But I actually think the card is good. I think America Chavez is just like very overtuned. Having 11 points on turn 6 in a row, if you're winning 2 out of 3 rows and you can play Hulk into the row you're losing to win that lane, then you're probably winning the game. And that's what I really like about Hulk. You often know if you're winning with Hulk. So you can snap or retreat, and then happy days. I really like the card. Angel is a really weird card because it's one of the few ways you can thin your deck, but it's very unreliable. The big problem you have with this is a lot of the time you want to save your Death Wish cards like Carnage and Deathlock until later on because you want to combo it with Nova. But then you also need to play them early to thin your Angel. So often Angel ends up just being a 1-2, which isn't ideal. I think you've got to put Angel in very decent, to be honest. It's just a lot of the time you're going to play it as a 1-2. But when you can thin it, it is definitely broken. When you can actually thin it, like it's up here. But most of the time, you're not. And so therefore, we'll put it into very decent. Iron Fist up next, mate. I'm a big fan of Iron Fist. I'm actually going to put Iron Fist into popping off. I think it's one of the most underrated cards going. I am a big fan of these movement decks, though, so I'm quite biased. Iron Fist combined with Multiple Man is great. Iron Fist combined with Vulture, which is Pull 2 card, is great. But there's also other things you can do with Iron Fist which can be overlooked. You can play a card into your Angela row, and then you can play Iron Fist rather, then play a card into your Angela row, which then moves it out of that Angela row, giving your Angela some extra stats. Similarly, if there's a location which is locked up and you can't play cards in there, like Sanctumorium, you can Iron Fist cards into that location. It is only 1-2 stats, but as soon as you've got other movement synergy, it's often played for many more points. It seems like my music has stopped, so I'm just checking. It's still there, it's still there. All right, let's look on to the next card. It's Iron Man. One of my favourite cards. Oh, I love Iron Man, mate. I did not really like this card that much at first. I am tempted to put it into Broken. I think the card is super underrated. I'm going to put it into Popping Off because I think it's like really well balanced. I actually just love this card, love this ability for Iron Man. I think it's perfect. Obviously, combines really well with a bunch of cards. It's great with Dinosaurs, it's great with Chavez, it's great with Strong Guy. Gets countered by Enchantress as well. And Rogue as well, which are two very popular tech cards. Love the card. Really good with Nova. It's just good with everything. Obviously, though, it can whiff and it can play for next to no points in locations like the negative zone. It's really bad. Also, if you play it into an empty row as a 5-drop, then your next turn is very obvious that you're just going to be playing a card into the Iron Man row, and therefore you're making yourself maybe a little bit weaker than you should be. But Iron Man's great. Really big fan of the card. Iron Heart next. Iron Heart is a really interesting one. It's a card that early game you're going to be playing a lot, but then you do stop using it quite as much. I think I'm going to put Wolfsbane and Cosmo up one, actually. Yeah, I'm going to put Wolfsbane and Cosmo up one. I'm also going to put Ironheart into the lower part of Popping Off as well. Really great card early game. Really good in the on-reveal decks with White Tiger, Wolfsbane, Ironheart. That's why I'm putting these into Popping Off, because one of the best decks you do get early is this on-reveal Odin deck. And yeah, White Tiger, Ironheart, Wolfsbane, they're all going to be in there. And they're all, like, Ironheart and Wolfsbane are actually just really solid cards on that in their own right. I think I'm actually going to put them both up slightly above White Tiger. Because I never really played White Tiger as just a value card, but I definitely did play Wolfsbane and Ironheart as value cards in decks which aren't just on reveal. Jessica Jones up next. Jessica Jones, I think, is really pretty good. Probably a quite underrated card. I don't think I'm going to quite put her into Popping Off, but I'm going to put her into very decent. 10 stats for 5. Very solid. This is like one less than Hulk. Kazar, or as I like to call him, Tarzan. A very good card early game. Does get worse, though, the further you go on. There's not really many good 4-drops. So I'm going to put into very decent, near the top. Kazar was actually very... Do you know what? I'm going to put Kazar into the lower Popping Off, because he was very much one of the meta cards until these Dinosaur Moon Girl decks really took off. Good in Strong Guy decks as like your top end. Synergies with Squirrel Girl. And a lot of the 1-drops you get early game are some of the better cards. And Kazar's synergizing with them. The main reason it's in Popping Off and not in very decent, though, is because of the lack of good 4-drops in this game. If you actually look, the only 4-drop that I've put up in this high category so far is the Enchantress. And the next one, you've got like Swordmaster down here so far. There's just not that, and White Queen. A lot of the 4-drops are pretty bad. And so Kazar is going to be in a lot of your decks if you want a 4-drop. So I'm going to put him right at the bottom of Popping Off. I do think the card is really solid, and I do like it a lot. Angela up next. Angela is fantastic. What a brilliant card. She's not broken, mate. She's close to being it, but I'm going to put her into Popping Off. Probably just, I think Sentinel should go here. Just about here. I would not be surprised if Angela gets nerfed. She's got great synergy with Nightcrawler as well. You can play Nightcrawler into Angela's row, then move the Nightcrawler out. Iron Fist, as I mentioned as well. Also, interestingly, like if you move her with Doctor Strange, she's going to get buffed up. Also, if you Heimdall her, move her to the middle row and play Heimdall in that middle row, she gets buffed by that. She can play for 9 points pretty consistently if you have like that little extra bit of synergy, which for 2 stats is pretty bonkers good. Angela, though, has gone out of fashion a little bit at the higher ranks as people get into pool 2 and pool 3, but it's definitely one of the best cards from this first couple of pools, or the starter pool and pool number 1. Claw up next. Claw's really good. I like Claw a lot. I think we have to put Claw into very decent. Not going to quite put him into popping off. I think he's probably a little bit better than Jessica Jones. Definitely a card I liked using a lot, and you can combine it with Onslaught. Up next, we have Craven, and actually, I think we need to just make a new row. 1 second, add a new row. Add a row below. Yep, there we go. And we're going to call it, I think we're going to call it the Craven row, guys. Oh, what's happened here? We're going to call this the Craven tier, because this card is so bad. It will definitely get buffed at some point. It's a movement synergy card, which it buffs whenever a card is moved to its row, and it starts off as a 2/2. So you need to move 2 cards into Craven's row for it to be for 4/2. It's actually not worse than cards like Cyclops, but it's just funny to put it in the same row in it. Lady Sif is a discard card. I do think it's better than Swordmaster. I'm definitely not going to put it into very decent with Blade. I'm going to put it into decent. I'm just going to put it next to Swordmaster. I would avoid these decks like the plague, if I'm honest. Lizard up next. I'm going to put Lizard into the dead category. I think the card is terrible. Its ongoing ability means if your opponent has 4 cards in the opposite location, it loses 3 stats, and it's going to play as a 1-point card for 2 stats a lot of the time, which is pretty bloody terrible. We have Mantis up next. Mantis is such an underrated card when I first started playing the game. Similar to Cable. In fact, it has a very similar ability to Cable, except it is a Guardians of the Galaxy, which is a predict, but it's actually an interesting predictability, unlike the other ones, which are just boost. And I would love to see cards like Groot, etc., get more interesting abilities like Mantis. If you predict correctly, you are going to be drawing a card from your opponent's deck. But it's actually the top card from your opponent's deck. So Cable is the bottom card, Mantis is the top. So if you draw a really good card, you're actually denying your opponent drawing that card and getting it for yourself. And also it's just 1 cost, 2 stats. Being able to draw a card for that amount is just kind of insane. Like, if you hit Mantis and you predict correctly, she is absolutely broken without a shadow of a doubt. Realistically, though, you're not hitting it that often. Also, on turn 1, a lot of the time people actually don't play a card, so she's not even that good often to play on turn 1. She's great. Really, really good. I'm going to put her slightly below Cable, but if you actually hit the Mantis, amazing. It's just Cable is consistently drawing. Mantis is a predict, so she's obviously not quite as consistent, but she's literally twice as good because she costs half as much. And you could argue, you know, Cable's drawing the bottom card, not as impactful. Mantis actually drawing the top card can be very impactful and actually change the game. Ant-Man up next. Mate, Ant-Man is so flipping good. I'm a massive fan of the card. We can put Ant-Man into the popping off category. 4 stats for 1. You cannot go wrong, to be honest. Really, really good card. Medusa up next. Medusa I'm putting into a very decent category. I'm not personally a massive fan of Medusa, but she's 4 stats for 2 in the middle lane. You can't really go wrong. Obviously got some on-reveal abilities as well. I haven't played Medusa much myself, but she is very decent without a shadow of a doubt. Mr. Fantastic up next. Mr. Fantastic putting stats into all 3 lanes. I think it's really powerful early game. The further on, haven't just really been seeing this card getting any play. Got some onslaught synergy. I think he's very decent. I think it's probably slightly better than Claw. Yeah, I think Mr. Fantastic is very decent. Definitely prefer it to Captain America. And it's like a similar card, right, with an ongoing ability. I think putting points into all 3 rows pretty damn nice. And obviously you can win some games with cards like Mr. Fantastic and Claw by just catching your opponent off guard and overloading some lanes. That you've got 4 cards into that lane. Well, Mr. Fantastic, Claw, Kazar, these cards are always, I'm actually going to put Kazar down here, are always of putting stats. And Ironheart as well, putting stats into rows which are full. Blue Marvel also does that, but it's just so overshadowed by Nova in it. Mr. Sinister up next. Mr. Sinister is very decent. I kind of feel like people overrate this card quite a bit personally. We'll put it here. It's 4 stats for 2, similar to Medusa. Obviously, it's really good in locations where you want to get lots of bodies. There's also some synergy where if you can buff it in hand with cards like Nakia, cards like Okoye, cards like Not Cable. The other one that's like Cable that buffs. It'll come to me soon. But yeah, that card is also a nice way of buffing it up. And then the clone that you spawn is also going to get that buff. So it can be a really decent card. Honestly, a lot of people would say it's in popping off. I'm not a massive fan of the card personally. We'll probably put it like at the higher end of very decent. Maybe put it here. It's definitely a very decent card. I'm not personally not a massive fan because you're putting two pretty small bodies into a location, so then your opponent's got a lot of information that you're going to be limited in the amount of points. Obviously, with the Nova meta though as well, this card is better, but it probably should go into popping off. But personally, not a massive fan. Moongo, mate, Moongo is so broken, it's insane. You're increasing your hand size for Dinosaur synergy, for Collector synergy as well, which is pull 2 card, but Collector's a broken card. But then also, not only do you have the synergies of Dino and Collector, you're also just able to get some insane combos with it, like get double Dinosaur, get double Nova. Even if you're playing a discard deck, getting double discard cards. I've also been playing a deck with Iron Man and a card called Mystique in pull 3, which lets you copy Iron Man's ability, and suddenly you get double Mystique, which means you can get like 3 Iron Man. So Mugo just utterly bonkers card. I actually think it might be even better than Nova because I don't know. We'll have to decide on that. Nova's obviously going to be in the top category. Whether it's like better than Moongo or not is questionable. Because the other thing is it just gives you cards that you can play as well. Like if your opponent is if there's loads of rocks, for example, which can happen quite a lot with Subterranea, then Moongo's just giving you playable cards which you otherwise didn't have. There's very few ways of drawing cards in this game. You've got Cable and Mantis that are very, very strong. They give you 1 card. Moongo gives you 3 extra cards. It's just an utterly insane card. Even without all the synergies of Dinosaur, Collector is still really good, but then when you factor those in, it's just utterly bonkers. Morph up next. Morph is a really fun card. I'm going to put it into decent. Probably like here. It's more of a fun card, but obviously you can morph into Infinite, which has happened against me before. I had like 4 rocks in hand and someone morphed into Infinite, so yeah, that was fun. Multiple Man up next, mate. Multiple Man is popping off. Definitely popping off. The big problem with Multiple Man is the fact that it just doesn't have that many other support cards in the movement decks, but it is the only way that you can get these movement decks really popping off. We'll put it down here with Iron Fist and Heimdall, because the movement deck is pretty bad. It's definitely worse than just like a mid-range deck like Stronger. It's definitely worse than Dino Moongo. It's also worse probably than On Reveal with White Tiger, but it's definitely better than this card, and it is my favourite deck in the game. I just love the movement decks. Big fan. A Multiple Man is that card in pull 1 that is allowing you to actually get some stuff going off. You can play it with Cable. It's not Cable, it's Forge. And Hulkbuster, Iron Fist. Lots of synergies. Very, very fun card. Big fan. Apocalypse. Mate, I think Apocalypse is kind of terrible. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to put it in decent. I'll just put it with the other discard cards because I don't really know what to do with all the discard cards, honestly. As mentioned, we've got Blade, which has got some uses outside of the normal discard decks. But yeah, I'm not a big fan. Apocalypse, you also can't replay with Stronger. I'm sure, though, these cards will get better as we get more into pull 3. I do think they need to sort out the discard decks in the early game and make them more functional. Namor up next. Namor's a really weird card. I'm actually not a massive fan of Namor. I haven't played it that much. I'm going to put it into decent. I don't think it's very decent. Obviously, in a location like Atlantis, it is very decent because you get 15 stats for just 1 card. But a lot of time, it's just not going to work out. Like if you hit a location like Central Park with the squirrel, like locations where you're limiting the amount of cards that you can actually play on the board if your opponent's playing Storm, then Namor's often just going to be stuck in your hand because you've not got a spot to play him on. So I don't really like the card that much. Nightcrawler, broken, mate. I'm going to put Nightcrawler into the broken category as well. I think it's one of the best cards in the game. Again, have seen a lot of people cutting it once you hit pull 3 and stuff like that. But that's mainly just because of the synergies of Dinosaur Collector. You end up playing other cards which draw you cards. I think as soon as Dino Moongo are nerfed, cards like Angela, Nightcrawler are going to be back in it. Nightcrawler and Elektra, I think both deserve a nerf. It's just very difficult to actually nerf these cards. And because they're just 1 cost, like obviously their stats are, if you nerf them, if you were to lose a point off Nightcrawler, that is way more significant than losing a point off Shavitz. So not really too sure how they're going to deal with these cards. Maybe they don't need nerfs, Elektra and Nightcrawler, but they're still some of the best 1-drops and some of the best cards in the whole game, without doubt. Nova. Wow, Nova. Let's leave Nova right to the end. Let's keep the suspense going. All right, let's leave the suspense going. We've got Odin up next. Odin's popping off, mate. Great card. I think we'll put him probably just with the other on-reveal cards. That's probably better than White Tiger, but I would say it's worse than Ironheart Wolfsbane, simply because Ironheart Wolfsbane, you can just play as mid-rangey cards. Odin is very much going to be a card that you build your whole deck around. Odin's still really good the further you get on into Pool 3 and Pool 2. There's other cards which support Odin, so maybe you could put it above these, because I think Wolfsbane, Ironheart maybe go out of fashion a little bit, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to like actually put, you know, within the tiers, actually decide which is where. Onslaught, one of the last Pool 1, in fact, I think it was the very last Pool 1 card I got along with Apocalypse. So I haven't actually played Apocalypse or Onslaught much. I don't really like the card that much, but I think it's definitely very decent. You can combine it with Mr. Fantastic, with Claw, to put lots of points into other rows. Of course, you can combine it with Iron Man to have 1,000,000 stats in your row. I think it's best paired with cards like Claw, Mr. Fantastic, putting stats into other lanes. Maybe you have your Iron Man in there as well. But Iron Man and Onslaught all in the same row is a bit of an overcommitment. You're just going to win by 1,000,000 points. Usually Iron Man's going to be enough. So yeah, really looking out for cards like Captain America, Mr. Fantastic, Claw. Like Captain America is actually very solid as well with Onslaught as well. So maybe we could put these guys up a bit. We'll do a little pass once we've done it and see if there's any that we want to change. Professor X. I'm going to put Professor X into... Professor X is a really hard one. I have not had much joy with this card, but I know some people have, and are big fans of it. If you combine it with Wave, which is the pay-to-win Battle Pass card, I think it's really good in those decks. So if you've got Wave, it's probably popping off, honestly. I think we put Professor X into popping off category, just for the synergy with Wave, because you could get Wave from the Battle Pass. Cool. The Punisher, I think, is pretty bad. I don't really like the card very much. I think we'll put it next to Captain America. Slightly worse than Captain America, I think. It plays for 6 stats, but a little bit more unreliable. Maybe these cards can both go up, honestly. I think Namor can probably go up a little bit as well. Captain America and Punisher are both, honestly, I think Captain America is actually pretty damn solid. And then I'm going to put Punisher like with the other ongoing cards. Yep. But just slightly worse than Captain America, in my opinion. We have Armor. I think Armor is really solid because of the Nova meta. I think we'll put it next to Cosmo. Cosmo and Armor and Professor X, kind of all similar, like with, you know, Armor being the weakest on paper, and then Professor X being the strongest on paper, but obviously the most risky. The thing with Armor, obviously, at the moment, is Nova. So I think Armor's better than Cosmo at the moment, but as soon as Nova gets nerfed, I think Armor's going to become also much worse. It is a tech card for the meta, but right now it is really, really good. Finally, Nova. Okay, big decision. Nova here or Nova here? I'm going to be controversial and say Nova here. I know. I can't believe it either. Nova is just unbelievably busted. Like, the stats on this card are just through the roof. Like, buffing everything by 2 is, of course, outrageous. The reason I'm putting it below Moon Girl is because it can be countered with Cosmo, with Armor. It also requires you to play some slightly below average cards in Carnage. Oh, Carnage is kind of solid. And Deathlock. It's very easy counterable, as mentioned. But also, Moon Girl, mate, is just ridiculous. Like, Moon Girl is just ridiculous. You can't counter Moon Girl. How are you going to counter it? You play a Cosmo on the exact row that your opponent's playing Moon Girl on the exact turn. Like, that's the only way in it. So Nova can get countered. Moon Girl can't. I think Moon Girl is just unbelievably broken and problematic for the game moving forwards. I think like Dinosaur, Nova, all these cards can keep their abilities. They just need to be tuned down. Like Electra can keep her ability. Maybe just needs like tuning down slightly. Nightcrawler can keep his ability. Just feels a bit strong at the moment. Chavez can keep the ability, but it definitely needs a nerf, in my opinion, of like 2 or 3 stats. Dinosaur, similarly, could just start at like -2. Nova, buff by 1, or even like just an up its energy or something. Whereas Moon Girl, like, fundamentally the design of the card is unhealthy for the game and will continue to be as long as it exists. You can basically put Moon Girl into any deck. Like, if you're trying to build a discard deck, you put Moon Girl in because you get more discards and more payoffs. If you're trying to build a movement deck, you probably play Moon Girl, so you get more movement cards and more movement payoffs, etc. So, yeah, I think Moon Girl is actually secretly better than Nova. Let's just do a little quick pass and see if there are any changes that we would like to make. Spectrum, White Queen could go up into half decent, I guess. Maybe I've been a little bit harsh on some of these. Like, this card maybe deserves to go there as well. I'm keeping White Queen and these guys down here. As you can see, we've got a lot in popping off. Maybe we need to like lower some of the cards in popping off. But honestly, there's none of these cards really which I feel great about removing. Like maybe Professor X, but as mentioned with Wave decks, I do think it's really, really good. Very decent. I'm happy with all of these being in very decent. Maybe Medusa could go down. I'm personally, yeah. I think I'm gonna put Angel, Rocket Raccoon, Yondu down. Medusa can stay here, I think. But yeah, I'm going to move these geezers down. I don't like Namor that much. Forge I'm going to keep here as well. Even though Forge is like one of the payoff cards you need for multiple man, it is pretty bad and gets massively overshadowed when you hit pull 2 with Naki and Okoye. Yeah, they're the cards. I'm not really sure where else to put them. Yeah, Gamora's fine here. I'm happy with this, honestly. This is my tier list, guys. So I'll zoom out a little bit so you can see it all at once now that it's all in. Here is my tier list. If you guys want to do your own tier list, you can follow the link down below. Make sure you let me know if there's any cards that you massively disagree with. Obviously, ordering within each of the categories is not perfect. It's very, very difficult to do that. But this is my general tier list of the pool 1 and the starter cards. If you guys would like me to do pool 2, let me know. If you would like me to do pool 3, it's going to be more difficult, but let me know. And yeah, is there any you strongly disagree with? I'm definitely excited to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget, if you've watched this far, to check me out on Twitch. Like the video, it really does help. And please do comment down below. Really interested in what you guys think. And yeah, this has been my tier list. My name's been Specimen. Well, my name still is Specimen. Thanks so much for hanging out and watching, and see you on the next one. Deuces.